Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is my presentation for PE 589, Physical Education and Exercise Science Capstone. My name is Vanessa Staley, and I have been a physical education teacher for 8 years. For the past 6 years, I have been teaching at a high school here in San Diego. And I also am a varsity basketball coach as well as a softball coach, both for female student athletes here at the high school. One thing that inspired me to do this capstone presentation and research was the amount of fear and game time anxiety and lack of self-confidence that my athletes have on and off the field and court. So one of the reasons why I came up with this research proposal purpose question is so that I could help my athletes as a coach here at the high school. So to begin, the title of my presentation, The Effects of Mental Imagery Techniques on Female High School Softball Players' Game Time Anxiety, as well as Skill Performance. And this is the final capstone paper, Spring 2, 2016, and Andrew Allstott was my professor. So purpose and research question. Again, the purpose question of this study was to investigate the effects that mental imagery techniques have on female high school softball players' game time anxiety and skill performance. For this particular research study, I used a script for the mental imagery technique and the hitting skill in softball. I had two central research questions. The first was the effects of these mental imagery techniques on their game time anxiety. And the second one was the effects of the script, the mental imagery technique, on their hitting performance. Some of my values, faith, and beliefs. I really liked the verse Proverbs 24:32. I applied my heart to what I observed and learned a lesson from what I saw. So as a coach and as a teacher, I give my everything to my students every single day. So one thing that I can do is to continue to learn and continue to stay up to date on the latest research so that I can prepare them to be the best that they can be in whatever they're doing. With regards to this practice, I know how much game time anxiety affects my athletes, so this is something that I really wanted to dive deep into and learn a lot about so that I could apply it to them and help them out. Doing the Strength Quest paper in this course allowed me to find a few strengths that I possess: adaptability, includer, harmony, developer, and empathy are all strengths that I include that I think apply to this research project. There were 3 articles that I discovered while researching for this capstone that all relate to my paper and have helped me develop my paper as well. The first, by Case and Rudsepp, they studied the link between anxiety and self-confidence. And they discovered that there is a direct link related to self-confidence and performance. So what they did was they took 12 basketball and 12 volleyball players, they were all males, and they gave them a quantitative study using Likert skill questions, the competitive state anxiety inventory, which I also thought worked perfectly with my capstone paper. So from this study, that's what I took away from it, was using that inventory to get my results. And like I said, what they discovered was that the game time anxiety was directly related, and that's powerful. If we can increase our athletes' self-confidence and decrease their anxiety, which allows for an enhanced performance. I think that as a coach, that this is something we need to focus on. So this study was really powerful for me, just seeing how important mental imagery is, and using the CSAI for my study. The second article, Krautner, McKenzie, Westwood, and Bowe, they proposed that someone can learn a motor skill by mental imagery alone. So this was without physical practice. They had 64 participants. What they did was they sat them in front of a computer and they used their dominant hand, so all of them were right-handed. And what they had them do was a finger tapping skill. And they discovered that with this simple skill, that these athletes could learn it with just mental imagery alone. So through this study, I kind of discovered how important this mental imagery piece really was to my athletes. To be able to not physically move your body and learn emotion was like kind of mind-blowing for me. However, what this research showed me was that for more complex skills, such as softball hitting, that mental imagery combined with the physical practice is what is needed to enhance the performance. So that's what I gained the most from this study, combining the two, because having one and not the other, they don't complement each other and you don't get the most effects. The third article from Olson, Johnson, and Nyberg, they examined the effects that imagery had on high jumping performance. So what they did was they used observation, and they also use a descriptive research quantitative study similar to mine by using the inventory with the Likert scale questions. And what they were trying to measure is the increase in the high jumping scores. So very similar to my study, this is one of the studies that affected me probably the most, because what they got out of the study was focus on these small improvements. So they didn't see gigantic improvements in high jumping scores. They focused on just minor changes in performance. And that's similar to what I found during my research, was although my softball players didn't become the best hitters in the world, they improved. So this had a great effect on just focusing on the little things and not reaching for the stars. They also used, in that study, they also used observation, which I thought was a really good tool, and I used it for my study as well. So moving on to the procedure and methodology of my study, it began with submitting my purpose and central research questions to the IRB and also to my faculty advisor, which was Andrew Allstott, for approval on this study. As soon as I got approval, I was able to send out minor consent forms, since all of my participants were under the age of 18. And also I was able to send out my surveys, and within a matter of a day, I had my consent forms back, and my athletes were spending 30 minutes is all it took, and that's how long it took for them to complete the demographic survey, as well as the sports competitive anxiety test and the sports skill imagery questionnaire. As soon as I got the results, it was really quick for me to type them into an Excel spreadsheet and discover who I wanted in my experimental group, which was the mental imagery and physical practice combined, and my control group, which was physical practice only. As soon as this was all done, the next order of business was my observation piece, and that included setting up a pitching machine, having someone pitch from that pitching machine, because I wanted every single participant to get the same exact type of pitch, so that it didn't throw off my results with different live pitching. So each participant was then pitched 10 balls, and I recorded the number of successful hits. So like I said, my participants were 6 female softball players from the high school that I'm at. One of the reasons why I chose this group was through doing research. There wasn't anything on this type of population. So it was very neat for me to be able to do this research, not knowing too much about this population, female high school softball players. They were aged 16 to 17. This was a quantitative study, meaning that I derived all my results from numbers. I started with a Likert scale, the SCAT, the Sports Competitive Anxiety Test. This was to measure their game time anxiety. The second survey that I handed out was the SSIQ, and this was simply just to find out how much experience they've had with mental imagery. They were also given a demographic questionnaire, which included very general demographic questions about age, gender, high school year, and then some specific demographic information as well, such as hitting experience, hitting coach, how many years they've played high school softball, do they go to the batting cages. So those all helped my study as well, getting to learn them. And some of the results. And to mention, I did these tests pre-imagery, so the control group and the experimental group did the SCAT, the SSIQ, and the observation prior to mental imagery, as well as post. So I did post-intervention studies as well to gather my results. I want to mention that this study was only given in a 2-week period. So the athletes over the 2-week period were doing hitting practice every single day, as well as 15 to 20 minutes of reading a mental imagery script. And I received really, really positive, great results. And understanding that this only happened in a 2-week period gave me hope that working with these student athletes on mental imagery for a longer period of time would have made drastic results. So really easy to administer, 2 weeks, positive results. So in the experimental group, there were 3 participants, and 1 participant increased their anxiety levels or decreased their anxiety levels from a high anxiety level from the SCAT all the way to a low anxiety level on the SCAT. My medium participant stayed medium, so no changes with her. In the control group with the anxiety levels, there were 3 participants in this group, and what happened was all 3 of them scored in the pretest for medium anxiety, and they all stayed in medium anxiety. So this group was the control group, no mental imagery, stayed the same. With the experimental group and the hitting performance, all 3 participants were able to increase their number of successful hits from the pre-observation to the post-observation. I saw the same exact thing in the control group. So in this study, both mental imagery and physical practice showed increased numbers of successful hits. From this chart, I'm just showing you that these were my 3 participants, and between the pre-intervention and the post-intervention, I had, 2 score in the high anxiety for the pre-test, and one of those high anxiety scores moved down to low anxiety after the post-observation. As you can see, 3 of my control group scored in the medium anxiety for pre-observation, and all 3 of them stayed at this level. So for the hitting performance, as you can see, all 6 of my participants, so we've got our experimental group, pre and post, at the beginning they all scored below 50% for their number of successful hits out of 10. And afterwards, everybody was above 60%. However, the greatest increase in number of successful hits was 5, and it came from one of the softball players in the experimental group. So this is the group that had the mental imagery script. Discussion. So from my purpose question, going back to it, what are the effects that mental imagery techniques have on, number 1, game time anxiety, and number 2, the skill performance of female high school softball players? It was a positive effect in numerous ways. 1, increasing the hitting performance, as well as decreasing the game time anxiety. Back to the results, I reduced one participant from a high anxiety level all the way to a low anxiety level with mental imagery scripts and physical practice. Both groups, 3 participants, so all 6 participants increased their number of hits from the pre to the post. And the greatest increase came from the group that included the mental imagery, the experimental group. There were 3 studies that were very similar to mine. They showed the same results and used the same methods of study. These 3 studies, the first by Peluso, Ross, Feller, and Lavoie, prove that athletes who are given the time to work on cognitive skills, such as self-talk, the script like I used in my study, can enhance athletic performance. So it is proven that mental imagery enhances skill performance. The next one was Lawrence, Cassell, Beatty, Woodman, Kahn, Hardy, and Gottwald studied the effects of preparing athletes for competition by introducing it in practice. So as a coach, we introduce game-like situations, physical situations in practice. So why not introduce the anxiety in practice? So for further research, this has helped me to understand that I don't need to just physically prepare my student athletes for games. I need to prepare them mentally as well. And then the last study by Levi et al. Studied the influence of mental readiness on an athlete's self-confidence before competition. The athletes that used mental imagery techniques were shown to have way higher levels of confidence. So going back to the very beginning of my presentation, I talked about how important this research was for me because many of my athletes suffer from low confidence levels fear of failing. So what Levi et al. Studied was if we can use mental imagery to reduce anxiety, the self-confidence levels rise dramatically. And that's all it takes to get some of our athletes to be more successful on the court. I have some future recommendations from this study. One of them would be to have a larger group size. My participants, I started out with 10, but after receiving the minor consent forms back and having students go through the whole process and procedure, I ended up with 6 who completed everything. So I think a larger group size would produce more results that I could study and look at. Some more time to gather research. This was a 9-week course, so we didn't have all that much time to really employ mental imagery, but given that I only did it for 2 weeks and I saw these positive results, it gets kind of amazing. So it'd be very interesting to see what more time would show. Also, using younger athletes and trying to figure out what age is most appropriate to start mental imagery techniques. I think this would be very interesting to see at what level can we start as coaches applying these mental imagery techniques. Something as simple as just watching a video, reading a short little script, positive self-talk. And then what is the period of time for acquisition of mental imagery skills? So a lot of my participants had no background in mental imagery. So how long does it take for athletes to really understand the effects of mental imagery and really kind of let their minds and bodies sink into mental imagery? I had 2 groups that I thought this study applies to the most. One was coaches. As a coach myself, I learned a lot from this research, and I'm going to apply it for every single one of my student athletes when I get to work with them in the upcoming season. It enhances their athletic performance. It's been proven, and as a coach, we want nothing more than to enhance our athletes' performance. It reduces the pregame jitters. I had, like this study showed, I had one participant go from high anxiety, super nervous, can't focus, sweating, butterflies in the belly, to more relaxed, visualizing themselves being successful. Increased confidence. So like some of the studies showed in this paper, that when we decrease anxiety, we raise self-confidence. This is easy to administer. It took 30 minutes for me to hand out a survey, receive the survey back, and another 10 minutes to type the results into an Excel spreadsheet. As well as I saw results after only 2 weeks of study, of researching this project. For the student athlete, it improves their self-confidence. So using mental imagery, it takes 10-15 minutes a day. It could be incorporated into our practice times. It improves self-confidence. Now, self-confidence starts on the court, but it stays with you for a lifetime, and it can help student athletes on and off the field. It reduces the game time anxiety. I can remember as a player getting nervous before a game. It's a normal body response. But if I were able to reduce that and start the game with no fear, with higher self-confidence, that would be great. Like I said, it helps on and off the field, so we're not only reducing anxiety prior to competition, but we are also building in reducing anxiety before tests, before getting your driver's license, and other life situations that can be kind of nerving. And then the biggest one is it improves performance. So through this research project, I have seen positive results in all 6 participants in improving the hitting performance. So as a conclusion to my presentation, I learned a lot from this study and realized how important mental imagery is to my student athletes. So it's changed me as a coach. I've already started writing practice plans to incorporate 10-15 minutes of mental imagery script or video. I think my athletes will react really well to video of themselves and of others performing the skills. I encourage you all to continue to learn new ways to enhance your athletes because as technology grows and exercise science grows and exercise psychology grows, we as coaches are going to need to prepare our athletes to stay with that growing curve. And then I enjoyed this experience. It has motivated me to continue to research and continue to learn. So thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Allstott, for supporting me in this research and changing the way that I coach. So now I'm going to open it up for anybody to answer any questions that you may have for me regarding my research project. Thank you very much.